76 cents of every single dollar you made each month went only to paying the interest on your credit card debt without ever paying down your debt a single dollar. And that left you with only 24 cents of every dollar you made each month to pay all of your other bills, your insurance, your housing, your groceries, your vehicle, everything. Could you survive as an individual? Could your family? The answer is obviously no. For almost every American, the answer is no. But that is exactly what just happened to the U.S. federal government, as our national deficit for the first time in history just soared past $34.9 trillion. And during the month of June 2024, 76% of all tax revenue collected from personal income taxes went straight to paying interest without paying down the debt a single dollar, leaving only 24% of taxes to cover Medicare, defense spending, entitlement programs, and just keeping the lights on. And we are in more trouble than any of us knew almost a decade ahead of schedule. In 2020, the Congressional Budget Office predicted that in fiscal year 2029, that is a full 5 years from now, the federal debt would for the first time pass $34 trillion. And they just started spending. Well, unfortunately, we just got there 5 years ahead of schedule, and it is catastrophic. This means that in under a decade, 100% of all of the personal tax revenue collected by our government, that is their largest source of income, will go straight to paying interest with no money left over to fund any other programs or our national defense. Last year, the CBO found that within 30 years, our debt will be equal to 181% of all economic activity in the country, and we will literally have no path back. When you consider that 76% of all personal income taxes are going straight to interest, that means that our increase in costs on servicing the debt due to inflation and higher interest rates has exploded 33% in a single year. But what's most terrifying about that is that if we reach a point where we no longer have enough money to pay interest and fund the government, which we can't really do now, that's why spending keeps going up and up, then what will happen is that we will see long-term increased inflation, and we will have to start borrowing more money just to pay the interest, which is illegal in the United States in many, many industries and regarding many, many kinds of debt. But for some reason, it's okay when the government does it. If you're like me, you're wondering how we got here. Most of us can think back to elections and remember that every single politician running for office said that they were going to rein in the debt. They were going to pay down the debt. We were going to get budget surpluses. We were going to get balanced budgets. But we haven't actually had but a single budget in the last 8 years that was actually delivered by Congress. None of them have been balanced. We failed audit after audit after audit in our defense programs and at the Pentagon. And what we have now is corporate capture of our government that keeps all of our politicians handing out government contracts, spending money like water to all of the companies that are paying them off with lobbying dollars, while no money is actually matriculating down to the American people when we're the ones that fund it all. Republicans all want to blame the Democrats and their out-of-control entitlement programs. Democrats all want to blame the Republicans and their out-of-control military spending, except now both parties have become military parties that are both pro-war and both pro-spending money on extra defense and extra overseas warfare. Would it shock you to learn that the last time that the U.S. Congress actually passed their annual budget and all of the proper appropriations as mandated by law was 1997. The last time they actually passed a budget resolution was in 2016, and that was a year late, and it was being made up for what was due in 2015. Can you imagine if we ran our households that way? We didn't make budgets, we didn't pay our bills, we just borrowed and borrowed and borrowed and said we'd get to it later, paid all of our money straight to interest, never had money for groceries, never had money for rent. We would be homeless. But we have allowed our politicians to run our government this way. And each time an election comes around, we allow each party that do the same things, take the money from the same billionaires. And like clockwork, in every single election season, we fall in line. We do what we're told, and we go out to those offices, and we vote for whatever party color we're told to, because we've been successfully divided enough and controlled enough by the same media companies that are owned by the same billionaires that are donating the money to these candidates to control every decision they make. And somehow The government contracts keep going out. Somehow, the government tax discounts keep going out to these corporations. Somehow, the bailouts keep going out to these corporations. And yet, we can't pass a budget. We can't bail out an American family. We can't meet the needs of the American people. And we still show up and vote for these two parties over and over again, never demanding accountability when we get the exact same no matter who we vote for. Incompetence, dereliction of duty, fiscal irresponsibility, and an absolute dedication to whatever the billionaires paying them demand. In just a few years, every single dollar in taxes we pay into the government will go straight to paying interest on the debt. What are we going to do? Because there's really only two paths at that point. They will have to raise taxes significantly. And I promise you, when it comes time to decide who's going to pay those taxes, only one party, the corporations or the people, will have the money to sway the interests of those politicians. And it's not you or I. We have to start demanding actual accountability, actual fiscal responsibility, actual accountability to the American people, and not the corporations that donate billions and billions of dollars each election cycle to keep those politicians doing what they are told, only benefiting the billionaires at the top that benefit from what is essentially socialism for corporations and the 1% being handed government contracts and bailouts so that they never have a risk of failing. While all of us suffer under the actual effects of capitalism at the bottom, allowed to fail, allowed to go bankrupt, allowed to enter homelessness, while our government continues to serve billionaires and never serves the American people. Each of the two primary party candidates right now are refusing to talk about lowering the deficit. And the reason they're not talking about it is because we have printed more money in the last 10 years than in the entire history of the Federal Reserve combined. In 2015, prior to the election of Donald J. Trump, our national deficit was $18.2 trillion. Just prior to Joe Biden taking office, the national deficit was $27.2 trillion. And today, it is $34.9 trillion. Now, I want you to understand that that means that the national deficit has doubled in just 2 presidential terms. But what's most upsetting about all of this is that during the entirety of that period of unmitigated, out of control deficit spending between 2019 and today, what we've seen is that American everyday working people's taxes have stayed almost exactly where they were, at about 37% as the maximum tax rate. But corporate taxes have dropped from a maximum of 35% down to a cap of 21% during that same time. So as the American people's taxes continue to go to work paying on this interest, corporations are paying less than they've ever had to in the history of the United States. The time for accountability is now. The time for continuing to look the other way as our politicians talk about the identity politics that keep us divided so that we don't work together to demand accountability on the issues that matter has to come to an end. And I think we can do it together. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany. We work together to fight private equity, to save small businesses in our community, and to save our country.